Hello and welcome to Standard Sports Ashes coverage. I'm joined again by Will McPherson in Adelaide to review day 3 of the second test. A familiar story, really. A few moments of promise for England before it all went horribly wrong. Will, your take on today's action?
Yeah, hi Malik. It was indeed a pretty familiar story, although they did mix it up a little bit this time, where they batted beautifully for a session at the start of the day, raising hopes that perhaps they could get out of Adelaide with, a draw, perhaps. It's probably not a win, but Joe Root and David Milan, for the second time in the series, batted for an entire session. They looked really at ease. It was just an excellent performance. It was really good batting. Australia's bowling looked a bit flat without Josh Hazlewood and Pat Cummins. And then they returned after the lunch break or whatever we're calling it, and it all went wrong.
Yeah.
Australia were, to their credit, were absolutely outstanding. They were relentless. They bowled full. Nathan Lyon was able to tie up an end and keep the runs down, and the seamers took wickets as well. And England were culpable. They had some poor dismissals where they let the frustration get to them, but they weren't scoring fast, and they lost 8 for 80 odd to be bowled out without avoiding the follow-on. Australia did not enforce, but that is only delaying the inevitable. England will face at least one period of brutality under the lights, certainly on day 4. And if they can make it into day 5, then Australia will get another crack with that too.
You'd be surprised if they did the way that they've been batting. I mean, the collapse, again, just an absolute disaster. And the problem that England have got is that when you've got Joe Root and David Milan, who obviously are in good form, even when they do build these big partnerships, Australia feel like they're only ever 1 wicket away from potentially the whole lot falling apart. What did you make of the decision not to enforce the follow-on? Was it kind of prolonging England's suffering, more overs into the legs of knackered bowlers?
I wasn't surprised by it. Australia they're in a wonderful position. It was an identical position to their position 4 years ago in this exact same fixture. Both options were great options for Australia. You either put more miles in the legs of England's bowlers. Their attack includes four seamers in their 30s, one of which is James Anderson at 39, another Stuart Broad at 35. They don't need to be flogging themselves around tomorrow, so that was a positive for Australia. Or the alternative was to have a crack at Rory Burns and Naseeb Hameed under lights, which worked very nicely last night for Australia. So they've taken the kind of slow route to victory, but I don't think it makes it any less certain that they'll get there.
And if the next couple of days go as they look like they will, and Australia will go 2-0 up in the series, I think none of us would give England the sniff of winning the last 3. But I know that something you wrote about before this tour was that 4 years ago, when things went badly wrong, the wheels never quite came off completely. Do you think they're in danger of coming off this time with 3 tests still to go?
It is difficult. I think in 2017-18, Joe Root was very new to the captaincy. England had some major disadvantages, particularly the absence of Ben Stokes, and for whatever reason they just held it together. They just stayed good. They didn't fall apart. Obviously they continued to lose and the losses became increasingly inevitable, apart from a draw at Melbourne, which was, in the context of recent English record in Australia, actually quite a good result.
As good as it gets, yeah.
So yeah, they've only avoided defeat in one of their last 11 games in Australia. So but this time it does feel a little bit different. But these have been 2 pretty bruising matches so far. And Root is obviously nearer the end now of the life cycle of his captaincy than he was 4 years ago. He's also got some more players, I think, whose direct places in the side are under threat. Rory Burns, perhaps Hameed, Ollie Pope, Josh Buttler, Chris Wokes, you can add to that list, all look like they're really not at the races, and that will become difficult because England have only got so many players they can change,
yeah.
And they're all just cosmetic changes. I don't think they'd make massive differences.
Well, we'll see how England go tomorrow. It may well be that this time tomorrow we're reviewing a second Australia victory, or perhaps we'll go to a 5th day.